Hello, everybody. We've got a lot more people joining, so we'll let them all come in. But welcome, everybody, to the reopening webinar series, Shaping the New Path for US Exhibition. We're absolutely delighted to have you all join us today, and I can see more people joining by the minute. We are today discussing the topic of couch versus cinema, friend or foe. So we're planning on having a really interesting discussion. We're going to kick off today with a presentation from my industry colleague, Nick from Groovy. My name is Catherine Downs. I am one of the founders of Usher U. We are a cinema technology company who's building a network of US theatrical partners at the moment, connecting your ticket sales to distributors marketing. So we're really happy to be here. Nick, do you want to say a quick hi?
Yeah, definitely. Hello, everyone. My name is Nikolai, as Kat mentioned, and I'm from Groovy, and we are a media and tech company that help companies across the value chain on getting bumps on seats or rentals, depending on the type of release.
Yeah, so look, we're here to talk about like what's the state of exhibition at the moment. We're talking about reopening, obviously, but we know a lot of you have been open for a while and on and off and at different capacity levels. But you know, a lot more is going to happen in the next few months. So that's what we really want to dig into, the meat of this. And we have a really good panel that's going to follow Nick's presentation. So we've Melissa Boudreau, who's EVP and CMO of Film Frog. And also she's on the board of Women in Exhibition, which I just joined a few weeks ago. So like say a quick hello to Melissa. There she is.
Hello.
We also have the esteemed company of Rich Daughtridge, who's CEO of Warehouse Cinemas, which opened last summer. This is a man into the world of the intrepidating world of pandemic theatrical launches. Rich is really experienced, and he's also on the board of the Independent Cinema Association, so he's definitely the voice of independent cinema in the United States. So we're really, really happy to have him here. And our final panelist is Gentry Ferguson, who is former Director of Partnerships at AMC. And Gentry is, I should divulge for purposes, also one of my colleagues, so because he's head of exhibition partnerships at Usher U as well. So if you want to say a quick hi there, Gentry.
Hey, everybody. Looking forward to the discussion.
So I hope everybody has a nice lunch with them, a mid-morning coffee. And we really appreciate your time coming today. There is a place to ask Q&A, and we're going to run some polls during the session. So feel free to be interactive, ask us questions, and we're really, really looking forward to a good discussion. Okay. I'm going to hand it over to you, Nick.
Great. All right, everyone. Before we start, I just want to say that everything is going to be recorded and distributed during tomorrow. So instead of spending your time screenshotting, as Kat mentioned, take part in the polls, take part in the Q&A so we can have a vivid discussion after this short run-through of the status of the industry. So where we are at the moment, it's been a grim year for exhibition. The pandemic has definitely amputated the industry quite drastically. 80% of the box office fell in 2020, and at the same time, there's been a massive demand for streaming. Interlinked with that, there's been a lack of studio titles, and those that's been there has been being pushed not once or two or thrice, but numerous different times. Audiences have been concerned about going to cinema out of fear of Corona. That might have not been completely fair with that assessment, because as of now, there hasn't been any cases of Corona tracked back to the cinema, but nonetheless, there's been not a lot of options to keep doors open. But it's not all bad. It's not over till the fat lady sings, because if we take a look outside of the US, then there's plenty of success stories that reminds us all that people are going to come back to the cinemas. And one of the highlights worth mentioning is that Demon Slayer has been the biggest movie ever in Japan. So there is definitely a lot of success stories after all. If we look at Wonder Woman, then that movie opened bigger in Australia, bigger than the first one. So it also just shows that superhero movies are still to be consumed in the cinema. We've also seen the release of different release models. One of them in particular has been this brief theatrical release, and then afterwards an exclusive release on one specific streaming platform. The same has been the case in the US, where Cinemark, together with Netflix, did the same for the Christmas Chronicles 2. And Mr. Mark Cerrati, the Cinemark CEO, according to saying, we're not talking about huge quantities, but when it makes sense, we're going to explore that alley as well. If we look at indie cinemas, then Curzon Cinemas in the UK, that also has a VOD platform, has also had success with simultaneous PVOD and theatrical releases. And now we're talking 2021, and things are looking very positive. If we look at China, then they had the highest growth in 15 months, and that despite 75% capacity restrictions. And they've already opened up 2,000 new screens in the first 2 months of 2021. And that also led the CEO of IMAX, Mr. Richard Gelfand, to say that the fact that people are able to watch something at home, well, that doesn't mean they're not going to come to cinema. But where are we going? There's a constant change for the new, before the new normal arrives. I can tell you so much that this specific slide has been updated daily because of the constant updates, most recently with Disney changing the strategy for quite a lot of their releases. So we are not in the greens yet. And but nonetheless, if we look at the survey that NRG did last week, then there is positive notes as well. The cinema audiences are ready to come back. 48% are aware of the fact that their local cinema are open, and that's an increase of 6% since last week. 68% also said that they are planning to return in the next 3 months. So all in all, the audiences are getting more and more ready and much more comfortable. A couple of weeks ago, or maybe just last week, Variety did some questions for the audiences that were able to return to cinemas in Los Angeles, and out of that came some interesting quotes, such as, "I feel confident bringing my family here. It's a completely different feeling in a theater." And what everybody knows is that the popcorn is really good. It is all about the popcorn. If we look at The Father releasing in February 26th, then it ended up expanding to 850 screens, but that's not really the key takeaway here. The main thing to notice is that 39% of the audience was those people that actually are in the high-risk group of catching corona. So it means that people in general are comfortable with going back to cinemas, also the older segment. And we are also looking at a summer slate that could bring the audiences in. And at the same time, we are also going to see that this trend of releasing simultaneously on PVOD and theatrical will be a thing. Most specifically, Disney came out now and said that Black Widow and Cruella will be releasing this way. But also Warner did mention that this strategy would so far only be applicable for 2021. 2022, they're looking at going back and revisiting the strategy, but nothing is, of course, set in stone. The theatrical windows are ever changing, kind of led the way with Universal and AMC, where they currently have come up to a decision where the threshold under and above a 50 million open weekend will define the theatrical window. But as I said, both Warner and Disney are exploring this option of having simultaneous releases throughout the year. But is that a bad thing? That is really the main question. If we take a look at the revenue from the tickets sold, and we look at week 3 and 4 of the theatrical release, then it's on average at 5.5%. So there might be opportunities in the fact that there is rev share coming out from the studios going back to the exhibitors. But potentially also from a programming perspective, it could be a good strategy to keep a shorter window and have more new movies coming to cinema at the same time. Talk of the town as well has been, is PVOD a sustainable model as an alternative to exhibition? And Trolls World Tour was quickly highlighted as a success story, 100 million in revenue and a favorable split towards the studio. But when we take a look at the top 10, it is worth mentioning that the top 10 PVOD releases, all of them had a theatrical release, which Trolls World Tour didn't. And what is the impact on the downstream revenue from a theatrical release, from digital rentals and sales? Well, if we take a look at a comparison between Trolls and Trolls World Tour, and we put our focus on the implied studio worldwide revenue, well, then we can quickly see that no theatrical release lessens the lifetime value of a film. Will the lack of theatrical release affect the film's ancillary revenue opportunities? We already heard the story about the fact that the cell phones in the Bond movie had to be updated because they were suddenly outdated. So there's also a negative effect that is interlinked with the revenue that comes from merchandise. But it is a fact that studios are focusing on their streaming platforms. Disney CEO Bob Chapek said, "We don't think it's the only way to do it. We believe it's important to put the consumer in charge and let them decide how they want to enjoy our films." And on the back of the PVOD release of Raya, then the price point of $30 is also equivalent to 5 to 6 cinema tickets. And that means that marketing budgets will be suddenly split between theatrical and between streaming. So there's lessons here, there's opportunities here to explore for you as an exhibitor, because there is undoubtedly the best data sets, audience data sets to access from an exhibitor perspective. And if we take a look outside of the US, then there is actually lessons to be learned. If we look at Eastern Europe, then they are very, very thorough in tracking their audiences outside of the exhibitor universe. They are able to send them very bespoke digital communications and offers. And then they are also very focused on making sure that whenever someone searches for a film online, then the cinema is going to be in the top. Now in Japan, they've taken it a step further. They have strike partnership with large parts of the ecosystem of the film industry, meaning that instead of just sharing a report from the exhibitor saying this is the segment, go and find them yourself, the cinemas are directly sharing access to the people that forgot to finalize their purchase, so that the distributor can go and spend their marketing budget in an intelligent way and on level with what they're going to be able to do with their own platforms. So exhibitors, the core message here is retarget your audiences. They are confused, they are bombarded with ads, and going to the cinema will and always will be a social exercise. So there's a lot of people that are not going to finalize their purchase in the first round. So if you make sure to give the distributors access to remind these people, well, then there's an uplift on the bottom line of 6%. There's also ways of going way beyond the newsletter approach, because today people want to be reached on multiple different channels with different kind of messaging, depending on if they're Facebook or they are on TikTok or wherever they are. So through this retargeting, you're also able to reach them in a much more refined manner and on many more channels. So the real key takeaway here is that you can let the distributor spend their money to sell your tickets, but you have to give them access to the audience, because otherwise that's not going to happen. Now, the talk of the town all over the world, the digital realm, is that we are preparing for a cookieless future. And this is, of course, interlinked with the huge amount of personal data that is being stored and collected across the internet realm. And this is the natural next steps in that journey. there's still a lot of unknowns in this. Also, when we get up on the level on the decision maker being Google, Amazon, and so on. So our advice for you guys is to sit down and start to research, understand the situation, and read up on it, because today and tomorrow there can be a completely new scope. Another thing is review where you're collecting third-party data. One thing is your website, but you probably also have an email marketing system, you have a CMS system, where you're probably also going to find out that you're going to have been using third-party data. And that has to be changed into first-party data. So therefore, there's an exercise here in understanding how you can make the most out of your own behavioral audience data. And the next thing is start planning for the future. We're 9 months away before Google has decided that their browser Chrome is going to divorce cookies. So it's not years away. This is going to happen sooner rather than later. And don't just stop there. There is numerous sources for information to get smarter on the subject. We have decided to dedicate the next webinar that's coming up in this series, where we're going to deep dive both into how you're going to prepare for Google's future, but also how much innovation that's coming out of the industry on the back of this. So stay tuned for that. And thank you very much for your attention. I will put the mic over to Kat now.
Thank you for the mic. And I'd like to invite our panel, Melissa, Rich, and Gentry. Do you want to join us now? Beautiful. As I saw the photos earlier, I just thought, like, what a good-looking panel. So welcome.
You're so kind, Cats. Thank you.
So thank you, Nick, for lots of interesting kind of information to set the scene. And obviously we know a lot even has changed this week. So I'd like to just kick off and let everybody maybe just talk a little bit about your experience, who you are, and like, you know, and actually one question I have for you is, how optimistic do you feel for the future of exhibition post-COVID? So Melissa, ladies first, as always. Oh, you're on mute, Melissa. Oh, no, still on mute. Maybe we'll go while you figure that out. I'll hand over to Rich. Rich, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us how are you feeling about business in post-COVID?
Yes. First of all, can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
All right. Awesome. My name is Rich Daughtridge. I'm the president and CEO of Warehouse Cinemas. I'm also a board member of the Independent Cinema Alliance. We also happen to own a marketing agency as part of our company. So we are in all things marketing, advertising, technology. And to the question of being optimistic, yes, very much so. We are seeing an uptick in ticket sales, and the slate's obviously frustrating at some level, and the date moves and all that. But we are extremely optimistic for really the end of Q2, Q3, and Q4 of 2021.
Yeah, so you think, like, okay, coming from June into July, when the big movies start to hit, that's when you hope to see. When do you see yourselves being up at, like, I guess, pre-COVID capacity, like, levels? Do you think that's going to come towards the end of the year and you're going to build up to it, or what's your prediction? So
my prediction is we're going to hit that in July, assuming the slate sticks.
Yeah.
For us, that last week of June, coming off some good titles actually in May and June, those are probably going to stay longer than they typically would. But honestly, what we're seeing is when July hits, we're hoping we're 100% capacity in the U.S. and Maryland, where I am, and then we feel like our numbers are going to be exactly where they need to be as far as budget.
Yeah, you're in a great place, Rich, if you've got a marketing agency attached to your theaters. To really take advantage. Melissa, I'd love to hand over to you and tell us a bit about yourself. Can we hear you now? Oh no, we can't. We did a sound test earlier, everybody, and it was working, but maybe Nick and Melissa, maybe some tips about how to reactivate that. Gentry, let's hand over to you. Tell us about Gentry Ferguson.
Good. Yes. Hey, a lot of familiar names in the attendee list, so good to see you. My name is Gentry Ferguson, and I had spent some time at AMC leading technology strategic partnerships for several years. And after I departed at the end of 2019, I had joined the team here with Catherine and Ollie and leading the mission to launch Usher U into the U.S. So super excited to help and reconnect with a lot of the exhibitor in the space. So and look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and for you, Gentry, say coming from you know, a large theatrical chain like AMC, you know, number one in the country. How optimistic? I mean, you know, I know you can't speak for AMC, you don't work there anymore, but you know, from your experience in that environment, how do you think that, you know, a large theatrical chain is going to be looking at this situation now?
Yeah, we obviously continue to watch the market very closely. Obviously, being a part of Usher U, we do that on a daily basis. But yeah, I mean, look, everybody's been facing with a lot of challenges over the last year, and some of these exhibitors have chosen to go a different route. We obviously saw Regal, you know, take a pause in their operations, and some didn't, right? And that's obviously driven by choice and expense. But now that things are starting to reopen, these are reopening for a reason, right? And that's primarily driven because studios are now feeding the content that exhibitors are wanting and needing, and that's fantastic to see. And like Rich said, when you look at the slate, you know, June, July, very exciting. And I think a lot of exhibitors that are on this webinar today are also very optimistic and excited for that. And I can guarantee you AMC is very excited for this as well. They've unfortunately been in the news a lot, both good and bad. And so I think we're all just kind of ready for some bit of normal. So
yeah. Have we, Melissa, do we have you?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Amazing.
Yay, technology. I mean, has anyone been on a webinar where this hasn't happened to you? I mean, I tested it earlier. I apologize, everyone, but I'm Melissa Boudreau, and I work for Film Frog Marketing. I'm the Executive Vice President and CMO. I come from the exhibition space, really passionate about exhibition, and I am an internal optimist. So I agree with, you know, all of you that I think we are on the trajectory up, and June and July is going to be very strong, and I'm really excited, and I think we are moving forward. I see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and actually, one thing I'd love to bring up, and it's something I was telling them earlier, like stealing lots of ideas I heard at panels at South by Southwest last week. But we're talking here today about, you know, the couch versus the cinema, and can they coexist in harmony? And do we need to be considering these as like oppositional? You know, I don't believe so, but I'd love your opinion. But one question I have, and we know obviously streaming has just had this absolutely crazy exponential growth during this period. But there is a theory that generally, like, consumers' appetite for audiovisual content, so movies, is just, you know, sky high right now. Is it possible, in your opinions, that the pie is just going to be a lot bigger after this, or is that like, or would the industry be happy to go back to pre-COVID levels, or can that like go beyond that across, you know, all the distribution channels? Rich, what's your view?
Yeah, I think the pie could be bigger, but I would say it depends on your product. So I think exhibition needs to make sure that the product that they're offering gives people a reason to get off the couch, first of all. So the obvious one is regular seating versus recliners. I mean, in my opinion, if you're not moving towards recliners or that more comfortable seat, you know, one of the biggest things that's trending for us on social media is when we talk about the fact that our seats have seat warmers in them. And it's crazy how people like completely just are excited about that. It's almost like, you know, the people that used to bring blankets don't have to bring blankets anymore. But it's it's making sure your product, you know, from a marketing perspective, that foundational piece, it has to be clean, it has to be a great seat, it has to be great sound, great picture. You know, we have to up our game. Yeah. And then I think we can succeed. And I think the more movies out there streaming and in theatrical is a good thing, but that product is key to me. Yeah.
And I was about to, when you're talking about heated seats, I'm thinking of people I know that bought new cars, and the first thing they tell you about is their heated seats. Yeah. It's like it's one of those luxuries. Do you guys agree about this, Melissa? What's your thoughts?
I think that it's been proven time and time again that people who love to stream also love to go to the movies. They just don't have that option right now, or if they do, the content's not there. So I think it will grow, but I don't think it's going to, and I hope it's not going to take away from the theatrical experience. And I 100% agree with Rich that things have to feel eventized. Things have to feel special when you go to the theater. You know, gone are the days when your feet stick to the floor and the theater's kind of dirty and dingy. Like, we have to step up as a community to make this such an experience that you are getting off of your couch. And I honestly believe the pent-up demand is there. And as soon as there's more content and people are ready, I think that we're going to see a boom in the industry. I really honestly believe that.
When you're working with, your movie theater clients, Melissa, for example, is there anything that, you wish they would do from, a marketing perspective that they're risk averse to do? What would that be? And will that make a difference to them after?
I think the biggest thing is exhibitors need to tell their story. They're so used to the studios doing all the marketing and, posting just studio content. How do you tell your story? What's the features of your locations? What's the features of your brand? And I think historically it's been a little bit easier for exhibitors because the studio spends so much money marketing all the content and people come. But now there's going to be more competition, and we need to step up our game as exhibitors to really tell our brand, our story. And that is a shift, I believe, in the marketing side of the industry, because it is going to be a little bit more difficult now, and marketing is going to need to be a key focus. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a marketer. I honestly believe that, and we need to remind people about this community shared experience with this brand and why you should support these brands.
Yeah, and from that perspective, I guess, I would say there are potentially exhibitors here listening saying, are you joking me? I have no money for marketing. And I obviously, Rich, you're on the Independent Cinema Association. This is the end of the spectrum that, they want to get back on their feet. And we know in every kind of crisis, marketing is the first budget to be cut. I'd love to actually ask you this as well, Gentry. What's your advice in those situations? I mean, there's different advice maybe for large chains, mid chains, pure independents. Like, how do you separate that out, and can they all use the same brush to tackle this issue, or how would you segment that?
Yeah, it's a good question because we've got a lot of different size exhibitors here, right? Your large exhibitors, they would argue that they've been doing that for a long time, right? And they have. There's plenty of marketing budget pre-COVID that was spent on brand, right? Even your mid-tiers, spent a lot of quality time doing that. A lot of that's changed given obviously everything that's happened over the last 13 months. But as you look to the smaller brands as well, that's so important to tell your story and why consumers should come back, given everything that's happened. Everybody's gonna be fighting for a consumer, right? As we think about, this kind of leads into a bigger conversation of, us consumers have been stuck inside and we've been stuck watching content from a streaming, service. And so now it's like, everybody's gonna be fighting for us, right? And cinema is really gonna have to step up and entice those people to come back in a more meaningful way than they used to have to in previous life.
Yeah, have you anything to add, Melissa?
Yeah, I was going to say too that I think social media for a lot of exhibitors. Sorry, there's some traffic here. Is in a lot of ways it's broken. Let's just be honest for a second. Like, we basically, and I'm the small guy, right? I'm the small independent that have his own marketing agency, so I maybe understand it a little bit. But we've typically, as an industry, especially independents, this movie's playing, watch the trailer. This movie's playing, watch the trailer. And we do that week over week over week, and Disney does their marketing. We fail to oftentimes talk about the feeling of going to the cinemas and really the experience side of it, right? So that's the promise we should be giving, that it is different, that it is better than the home, that it is, evening out, with the whole drink and food options that we have in a lot of locations. But I think focusing on that feeling is a little, just a small shift in your thinking on social media, even that won't cost anything, assuming you don't pay any paid digital. But how do independents mostly change how they promote themselves to how it feels to go out to the cinema versus here's a trailer, here's a trailer, here's a trailer? Because at the end of the day, engagement and that, as Melissa said, telling your story, independents have a great opportunity in that regard, right? We're just small and scrappy, and we just sort of figure it out. We happen to open in the middle of COVID, so we're like, hey, we're opening in the middle of COVID, why not? But I want
to talk more about that, actually.
But I think the point is, it's a conversation with your current customers and your prospective customers, and the conversation is, join us for the feeling of what it's like to sit in a large auditorium with amazing picture and sound, and everyone laughs together, right? If you hit that emotional piece, I think that's when social media, affordably even, can really help the exhibitors.
So let's shoot.
I want to add something. I know you said like tactically, like how do exhibitors do this? Nobody has time. We're trying to get the popcorn machine running, right? Like the last thing you want to think about. But is there someone on your staff that's willing to help? Do you have a younger staff person that's like really excited about social media? Maybe you can give them, here, go around, tell a story about what's going on in the theater today. I mean, there are people on your team that probably would be willing to do that for free, or find an intern that's willing to do that for free as well. And then the other thing, let your guests be your biggest champions too. So encourage people to review you on Yelp or Facebook or Google. Screenshot those and post those on your social media, because that's personal to you. So those are just quick tactical things that I know most exhibitors that are listening to this, big, small, whatever, nobody has time right now, especially right now.
I totally agree with you, especially on this idea of like getting someone in your team, because for a generation that's maybe like working in your concessions, this is a natural way to live, to show. And it's not natural necessarily for the 40 somethings in our in our generation. So really give someone a chance to develop their skills, and I'm sure they jump at the opportunity to do it. So actually, that's actually a very good practical tip. Another question, so obviously, and Nick has touched on this about like the incredibly valuable data sets that exhibition chains and everyone has, and you've owned that relationship with the consumer and the cinema goer for so long. You are direct to consumer, and studios and everyone's trying to also be direct to consumer. Everyone in the world is trying to be direct to consumer right now in every kind of vertical and industry. But what can I guess, and obviously Nick is talking about how you can share that data and get other people to market, which I definitely agree with. Get distributors to market and sell your tickets for you, I think is a really good collaboration to think about. But what else can you do? What can you be doing better with that data as an exhibitor to really like maximize your benefit from it? Because data sitting there is not valuable. It's dormant. It's not valuable. Like what's your advice to exhibitors? And by the way, Rich, you've just launched a chain. So you had to get your first consumer who was loyal, and your second and your third, and you're just going to build that over the years. What way did you approach that for Warehouse Cinemas?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the challenge of getting data is very, very difficult when you're talking about your POS system. So what we tend to do, and I could talk about this for a long time, but I'll try to keep it brief. We tend to talk about loyalty data, right? So if they join your loyalty program, therefore you have data, therefore you can market to that person. There's a whole revolution, if I could use that word, if we can figure out how to use transactional data in addition to loyalty data. Loyalty data just makes that data richer, right? Yeah. But if we can figure out and predict, I mean, Amazon does it, Netflix does it, right? Netflix algorithms are publicly available. There's 112 of them, I counted. Like, we know that if we can predict behavior based on their past movie-going behavior, that we can predict what movie they want to come to see next. So we essentially, I think the bigger challenge or question is, or two challenges. One is getting to that data. So there's only a few POS players available. I've had conversations with most of them about this. And then the second challenge is just augmenting what the studios are already going to do from a marketing perspective. I mean, let's say that there's still 80%. Disney's still going to promote their movies with 80%, but the 20% is potentially the difference between profitability and not.
Yeah.
Right? So like, and that 100% is data. I think the revolution is if we wake up in 3 years or 5 years and we're able to, as the industry, as local independents, for example, and big, we can collaborate with the studios to just do better marketing, right? Like TV advertising isn't the end game to getting people in your seats. I mean, there's a digital revolution that we're missing here.
100%. And, it's targeting. It's really like micro targeting those people to understand who they are as groups. Gentry, you came from a large chain you were leading partnerships. What would be your view on this?
Great lead in actually, Rich, because, I spent a lot of time curating partnerships with other third parties to get AMC tickets everywhere. That was my responsibility. And we did one heck of a job doing that and getting to audiences that maybe AMCtheaters.com couldn't do that. Right. When I met the Usher U team, I was actually, I kind of fell in love with their product immediately because it was taking care of a problem that I saw in the industry, which is exactly what Rich just said, is collaborating directly with the distributors in order to work more efficiently with exhibitors to understand who these consumers are, right? And understand what kind of movies they want to see. And this is obviously more specifically by distributor, but as this network grows, we now understand habits. And then we use those marketing dollars by the distributor to retarget and actually be meaningful in the type of work that we're trying to do in terms of getting that consumer to buy, which is such an easy transition for me. I was on the side where I was partnering with companies to get AMC tickets everywhere. And now I'm on the reverse of that. I'm trying to collaborate directly with the distributors and bringing a lot of you exhibitors on board. And so that that seamless transaction can happen. And we're super excited about it because it solves a lot of the problems that exhibitors are seeing today. And we'll see that moving forward, right? This conversation is going to evolve more into, we're talking about the content from distributors and how exhibition plays a role in that. This really ties it together. So I'm definitely excited to see that happen.
I was just thinking there when you were talking, like, imagine, we're talking what were before, this pandemic, fairly predictable patterns and behaviors. And Nick, obviously, and his team are kind of pros at analyzing this for what consumers do. But imagine we're going to have like an explosion of like activity and attendance at theaters. And then, we're going to have like people being gluttonous about their trips to the movie theater. There's going to be all kinds of like wacky data probably for a while before that kind of settles down. But there's going to be some very excited marketing analysts working their way through this and trying to figure out, how to get these, to figure out the new patterns of what's going to be there after this.
Well, what's fun too, Catherine, about all things data is the ability to measure it. So we can measure, everyone on this call knows it, but digital media has given us the ability to really prove a return on investment or not.
Absolutely.
Right? Through A/B testing, we can do different emails to figure out and move the needle. And we're dealing with big AMC numbers. I mean, it's a lot of money that A/B test is going to prove out. But what's fun about it is if we figure it out, we have the ability to create a dashboard. This is the revolution. You should all get T-shirts.
Yes.
The data revolution.
Can we do this?
So you like I've always said that if you figure out how to measure the ROI and you figure out the APIs and you pull it into the dashboard, and the dashboard basically says, XYZ, small independent in my case, spends $1,000. It's like, whoa, $1,000 is crazy. But if I can via hold back a control group and I can actually prove lift, that $1,000 turned into $3,000, and then I know my per cap for concessions. I can even do that. Just the two numbers on the dashboard, box office, concession, and a total number in like 20-point font is the lift dollar-wise of all things the same. Data was the difference of that. So that's what's fun about it, is that it's clearly can be measured and proven as well.
Yeah. No,
Could I step in there?
yes,
I would just say, please take the dashboard and give it over to the distributor, because they're the ones that are actually spending the marketing dollars on getting people in. And now we've been in the industry for 10 years, and our whole business started up on the fact that since this data was not shared, there was room for a landing page where we could at least ring the doorbell and get some kind of idea on how many people that would enter that journey. But we have not been able to get any kind of access to that data up until recently. Luckily, a pandemic has pushed the innovation in a direction where exhibition is understanding it. But I think it's important to highlight here that the world doesn't stand still. It's not just movies that people can consume online and can be approached with. We have other entertainment industries that are actually doing a pretty good job. And it's moving away from this silo thinking, release to release to release. We really have to have, some kind of ecosystem so that everything gets smarter, because every time you start over, you have to buy that person again, and you're bidding again everybody else in the world, So the smarter you can be, the better you can be, and the more people are going to come to cinema because the message is going to be coming through to them.
Yeah, it's very interesting saying, Nick, and we talk about that a lot when we're working with distributors and exhibitors about a cold start. So we think of this like, each movie, everyone's going back to zero, and you just need to figure out ways to mitigate the risk to go to zero. So building a database, reaching out, having a fan base, like you're saying, having engaging in social media and owning all that data in your own realm is so important. Guys, we have some kind of cool questions coming in from our really great audience. So I'm going to jump into one. Melissa Chambers says, the golden age of documentary has hit a high during COVID and lockdown, with streamers pumping them out. Do you think this love of docs will continue into theatre? And are there any genre you think will be clear favorites when audiences return? So, Melissa, let's start with you on this. I see you not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that exhibitors have learned potentially from this, or all of us have learned that we need to diversify the content that we are showing. And I think specifically documentary, because of how much they have been blowing up during this time. I don't know about specific genre, but I do think that like esports and boxing matches and other types of diversification within content is what we're also going to see that's going to change within the theater. So with documentaries as well, but I also think the content is going to become more diverse.
Yes. Rich, will you program more documentaries at Warehouse Cinemas? Yes, that's part A, and part B is, will you program more foreign language content? Because that's another thing that's kind of blown up, right?
Yeah, the way we would look at it from a marketing perspective is it depends on the market. We have a couple of LOIs out there of doing additional locations, and some of them are an urban area versus a rural area. So it actually depends. You have to look at your market and say, is that going to be a good foreign film market, or independents, or even documentaries? But to answer the documentary question, it reminds me of what Melissa said earlier. Like, yes, we'll program them, but we would like to, if possible, have an additional element of eventizing that documentary, which means a Q&A afterwards.
Yeah.
Right? It's a little more work. It's a little more programming effort. You have to add a little more time at the end. But I think, it's not a theatrical booming movie. It's a dialogue movie in a lot of cases, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to figure out what's the event of that. And so and at the end of the day, you're creating community. So I would say yes, but we would probably look at an event in addition to it. Yeah,
very good. Yeah, well, like you were saying, Melissa, eventize the experience. So actually, on top of data, we have more questions, which I will get to, everybody. Thank you for submitting those. On top of the whole piece around, obviously, like really maximizing your data and your audience, there's obviously a lot of digital tools and technologies that will maybe become more important to increasing people's comfort levels coming back to your theater. Things like, pre-ordering concessions digitally, whether you develop, some kind of app or application, or buying a technology to do that. What do you think? What are going to be the trends in exhibition? And look, were nascent. They probably already have become more established. But what's going to stick? What should an exhibitor invest in to this end?
Can I jump in, Kat? So one thing, obviously, technology is king, data is king in exhibition. And the problem is when you look at the spectrum of very large exhibitors to small, everybody has a different budget and or resources in order to do so. So obviously your larger chains have been doing, or at least starting mobile order concession and those kind of, if we want to think at a high level. But think of us as consumers while we've been stuck at home. We have turned to digital more than ever. The ease of getting food to us with the click of a button, or when we show up to a restaurant in order to get carry out, it has to be seamless. The experience is extremely important. These types of things are extremely important for exhibition because now these consumers want things and they want them easily, right? And they want it seamlessly. So now we have to take that into exhibition and just amplify that. So those that have already done it need to do it better, right? And those that haven't need to get on board and do it because, I've been spoiled. I want my food at my door. I want it hot and I want it, in 10 minutes. And when I go back to the movies, it's like I'm going to want that same experience and very seamless, right, as a consumer. So technology is just so important, always has been, but it's now exponentially even higher.
What do you think, Melissa?
I think we were on the brink of this. Honestly, before the pandemic, people were starting to roll this out. Atom Tickets was rolling it out. People were doing it with their own apps. But I think with exhibition, it was just slow to pick up, right? And people are just so used to waiting in this line to get this, waiting in this line to going to, this. But I think in-app ordering, I agree. Tickets on your phone. I mean, anything that you can do on this device, which is in everyone's hand 24/7, is the way that things are going to move. I think tickets, food, concession ordering, anything you can do to make the process low barrier to entry, right? That's what everybody wants. What are the ways that we can make this process easier through technology? And I think tickets, food, and beverage, it's just been accelerated to 1000% because of the pandemic. So I do think that is where everybody is going to need to be. I think it will stick. I think there will be people that will still go wait in the concession lines, but I think people are going to want the ease of picking up.
Catherine, one other thing to just jump in, and this is an interesting number because even pre-pandemic, we saw that a lot of people still walked up to buy tickets, right? Yes. I think we were all slightly staggered by the amount of people still doing walk-up orders, right? I know I was when I saw the numbers. Because I was never that person. I order it digitally, just like Melissa said. If it's not on my phone, it's not happening. And it'll be so interesting now when moviegoers go back to see what happens there, right? Because now we've almost been taught that we have to do things a little bit differently now. Like standing in line is almost kind of a weird feeling, like pre 2020. Yeah. So it will be very interesting to see if now that shift to digital increases significantly, right? Where I think a lot of exhibitors maybe took their time because there was so many people still walking up. Now this acceleration, you may just see that if you're not doing digital, there might be a turnoff of consumers. And I think we're going to see a lot of that in the coming months as many more people start to return.
Well, and will it affect per caps? Will the per cap go down if you aren't doing it digitally? I'd love to hear what Rich thinks too, because obviously with ICA and the smaller exhibitors, can they afford this technology? Can they roll it out? Do they have the capability? I mean, that's the problem when you go from very, very small one screen to obviously the biggest chains. How do they do it?
Yeah, it reminds me of technology in general is a scary thing for some small businesses, right? So you have to consider that. So I think it's got to go through the POS, obviously, and just. One of the ICA's pillars is education. So we have to educate on all things technology to really just to elevate our members to get comfortable with it. Because the way we describe, and it's been said in different ways, but we have a strategic objective for 3 years for our organization to just reduce friction. Because when we go back to the couch versus the cinema, concept, walking in, can you walk in with with the least amount of friction, whether it be ticketing, concessions, all the way around? It knows where you are if you're on your mobile device, right? So you can actually make this streamlined thing, but also don't forget about the human element. So there's this balance there where someone still greets you, but they don't really do anything except how are you and what movie are you going to see? Because we have a tendency as an industry to get into the turnstile mindset where it's in and out, it's in and out, it's in and out. And so I think that friction piece, if you think about it strategically, just what are the friction points, and then start to go down the list. And I agree. I think mobile concession ordering is key. But it reminds me of what I believe it was Domino's that invested a tremendous amount of money in their mobile ordering and delivering and everything else, and they were so progressive on it. And when COVID hit, they thrived because everyone ordered pizza, right?
Yeah.
But they were the ones that were guaranteeing a delivery, and they had mindset
of infrastructure ready. Yeah.
Right. They had the mindset of innovation and being progressive 3 years before that even happened. And I think that innovation mindset is something that we have to get comfortable with as an industry.
Their technology is better than their pizza, but they're selling a lot of pizza. So their technology is winning.
I agree with that, Gentry. That pizza.
I mean, look, there's another side to this where, we've all been quite isolated and looking at the same 4 or 5 people every day for quite a long time that, we might want to go up and chat, and maybe it is just the hybrid. But I think to your point, Rich, it is, there's the human touch, obviously, because this is a shared experience. But there's also, you've got to cater for more choices in order to attract more consumers into your doors as well. Okay, I'm going to jump into another question here from Brian Carter. One of the major concerns as we return to normal in staffing is around competitive wages, more jobs available in other industries, federal unemployment headwinds playing into the crisis. With people being such an important aspect of the business, is anyone else seeing difficulty acquiring talent? I suppose in that ramp back up.
I mean, I can speak for our clients. They are struggling to hire. The hiring process is a challenge right now. They are struggling to find people. Yes.
Is that because of they've gone off, worked in other industries, or what do you think is at the root of that?
I think it's a combination of multiple things, but I think, yes, they've gone to work at other industries, and with unemployment potentially being higher than the wage that these people may be earning, they may not want to come back, or they don't feel ready to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Melissa, just real quick on that. I follow unemployment numbers very closely, and a lot of it is driven by the fact that they are being paid more to not work. So the challenge that a lot of exhibitors are facing is exactly that, is the types of individuals that you would be hiring for your staff. It's being government subsidized for a while now. That's going to change, obviously, as we approach further into the year, which may obviously help the fact that you'll be able to find talent. But they're being paid more than they would have if they actually go to work, which is now a huge other discussion within that industry. So that's definitely driving a lot of the issues. Yeah.
I'm going to go to another question from Juan Herrera, who I know this name. I think based in Spain. In the next 2 years, many original films from Netflix, Amazon, and Apple TV will join a significant part of the most recognized talent from Hollywood. Will movie theaters consider playing this content in addition to the normal studio product? If the content is key and is king, it should not be relevant who is the provider of the movie, but the ability the movie has to bring people through the doors. So I guess the question is, as a theater, so maybe we'll start with you, Rich, and maybe Melissa, you can speak to your clients if you know of their opinions. But do you mind where the movie comes from if it's what your consumer wants?
So this isn't an official Independent Cinema Alliance position.
Your opinion.
This is a warehouse cinema position only.
Oh, so I'll be careful here. But, I think Hollywood needs to create great content. And if there are non-traditional distributors that create that good content and it's a great story, and it's a great acting, and all the things that make up the theatrical piece, I don't care where it comes from personally at Warehouse Cinemas.
Yeah.
You know, the challenge becomes there were actually some decent films, and there are some decent films out now, and even were released in the last 9 months. The challenge is it can be a great film, but we need to get to a place where there's a commitment from that distributor, whether it's Netflix or Apple or whoever else, that they are going to spend some advertising dollars, because I still believe it's the majority of what gets people out.
Yeah.
Is the budgets to market those films. Assuming that happens and the story's good, we augment with our own data with the revolution. We can actually, I think, sell a lot of movie tickets.
Started a revolution here today, Rich. Started it.
I'll be looking for that T-shirt. I'll be looking for that T-shirt after this webinar, by the way.
So yeah, our next webinar, we're all going to have to wear this T-shirt. We're going to
Yes.
We have some polls coming in as well. I'm going to jump back in as well to that question. But so question around the theatrical window for the audience. How long do you think it should be? 0 days, same day and date release. That's 22% saying this. Should be 31 days or less, 29%, or 31 days or more, 48%. So I guess we have a majority saying longer. On this point, because we can't gloss over, you know, the emerging trends in day and date release that have been emerging. So obviously Nick mentioned the point of, like, you know, does a day and date release potentially cannibalize the revenue opportunity of a theatrical release? So, you know, will we kind of maybe have shorter windows but move back to more sequential type releases, or do you think this is here to stay? You know, it existed before this situation, obviously, but what do you think in terms of, like, you know, studio and film movie distributor strategies around this? Or do you think that they don't know and they're just going to wait and see what works well? What do you think, Melissa?
I think I hope day and date won't exist after 2021, and it will go back to a shorter window. I do think that will happen. And as someone who used to be an exhibitor, look, after the first 4 weeks, we probably were already moving that content anyway. So is that okay? I think it is. In my personal opinion, I think it's okay. But I agree it should be after 45 days. And I do not believe in the day and date concept. I do think that it could potentially cannibalize some ticket sales. And I think it should go back to the more traditional model as soon as it can.
What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, I mean, I hope day and date doesn't stick around. I think that's going to be a big challenge. You know, I will say that the ICA came out and supported the Paramount decision. I guess it's been 4 weeks now or so, because they gave it, I believe it was 5 weekends essentially, if you did the math. And I think there needs to be some level of exclusivity. Is it going to go back to the 72 days that it used to be 2 years ago? No, it's just not. But somewhere between that and day and date, I hope we land in a 45, 50 will be my hope. But I think the other conversation that I think the industry should have, and again, I'm speaking as an independent cinema owner, is just greater flexibility with film as well, right? And I know in different parts of the world, that flexibility already exists. In the U.S., oftentimes we will have, you know, just terms of you're not able to stack films. You're not able to have a kid movie early and another movie in the evenings. There's things like just earlier availabilities. There's a list of things that would really help independents, again, especially if they had more flexibility. Mm-hmm. And that sort of paired with a smaller or a shorter window, I think you have a similar P&L at the end of the day. I think you have a similar profitability if you can sort of find that balance.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think ultimately, probably some of the economics will, you know, the economics or the maths will probably dictate, you know, how this really pans out, and like obviously who will. I think it will take a while to settle. Any thoughts on that, Nick or Gentry?
Yeah, I agree with Rich, and I think we're going to see some very interesting film programming. You know, the folks that live in that world are going to get very creative, and I think we're going to see some interesting things. But yeah, I mean, like Melissa said, I mean, probably after that fourth week, anyways, you were likely seeing movement. So I think the window will settle in, but we will all also find out as this kind of progresses.
Yeah, on this point actually, which is very much around the independent cinemas, which you'll know intimately, Rich, around these 1-screen and 2-screen cinema theaters that in this pandemic they kind of built their own virtual theatrical windows and kind of onboarded this technology. And I was listening to, I think it was named Zach Sandstrom last week during South by Southwest. Also, he's talking about, we always were kind of hamstrung by one screen, and then they started to experiment because obviously they were shut, and they suddenly had, a virtual screen, maybe 3 virtual screens, and then, they reopened and potentially they had bigger reach with some, new virtual loyal customers, while also soon obviously opening their site and ramping up capacity. The thing about the virtual theatrical window for very small sites, is this something that that you see from the ICA, even like them showing interest to maintain and keep going?
Yeah, the topic has definitely come up, and I've been in in a few communications with a few vendors that are rolling out that technology. It's a tough thing for independents, I think, to wrap their head around. It's like, I'm used to these walls, these 2 or 3 or 4 screens,
and mortar, yeah,
and it almost feels like they're cannibalizing potentially their theatrical if they do that. And I totally get it. And so, to be honest, I don't know the answer. I'm thinking about it personally for my location.
Yeah.
But I the way I see it is, if we have 10 screens, the 11th and 12th screen, is there the ability to make additional revenue? I think there might be, if you program effectively. So I call them sort of missional screens. So if someone's really supportive of your cinema, and they're like a moviegoer, but there's a documentary that you just can't fit in the middle of July, right? There's how many movies are in July now, right? There's like 4 blockbusters like back to back. So, but could that 11th and 12th screen be a documentary? You get a piece of the action as an exhibitor, but you're not cannibalizing Peter Rabbit or Top Gun, right? Because taking up a screen for a documentary may hurt if you do that, but not necessarily on the digital side. So it's a tough thing to wrap your head around, but I guess we'll all know in a couple years.
Yeah. Time will tell. So look, we're coming.
So Catherine, this was just something to add there. This was something that AMC had actually worked on. That this hit news in either early 2019, but during football season, right? AMC trialed playing some football games at select theaters at select times, right?
Yeah.
Just to see in those downtimes what that additional programming would do. So I don't know what the end results of that were, but I think taking that approach of trialing that, and I think we're going to see more of that, obviously, in the upcoming where some of those teams are being a little bit more creative.
Yeah. There's definitely new ways to look at that space and to extend the reach. And also, so many things have happened even in, general live streaming. Like a lot of musicians and artists have found their audiences online now and found ways to connect. And possibly, there's a place for the theater in that experience. If those individuals kind of continue to grow them, and the streaming kind of experience works really well. So look, we've actually so many questions. We've been running polls. There's almost so many things going on, and a really brilliant audience. But what's really important about this is myself and Nick kind of said, well, let's see what's most important to the audience and try and bring it to the next webinar, which we're going to host in the last week of April. And we're going to have hopefully not more movement in the slate, but we're going to have a lot more insights by then about where things are going. I think we're going to have a lot more data around box office as we've seen a lot of openings and everything. So we will actually communicate with everybody who's joined us this today about what that topic will be at the end of April, and we'd love you all to join us. But I'd love to finish this by asking each of you, which movie are you most excited to go see in the theater this year?
So many. There's
too many
movies.
to choose from.
So many movies.
Too many to choose from. F9
I have
maybe.
my screenshot.
I'll throw my hand for F9.
Okay.
I'm excited for Top Gun, but I wanted to add one more thing that we didn't talk about that I think we should just quickly. Private rentals. I don't know if anyone has anything else to say in this, but I feel like in the exhibition space, we always did these, but it was such a struggle to let people know that this existed. So if you are an exhibitor, like this is a way right now to get people filling your auditoriums that maybe they didn't know in the past, but now everybody knows that private rentals exist. So I just wanted to plug that in case anyone isn't promoting that or doing that, because it's just, it's a great way to make some extra revenue right now. And Top Gun.
By the way, Melissa, if we have these special green passes, are like we can socialize passport and get a big group of friends together, rent a theater, play a movie. There's lots of new and novel ways that the vaccinated will start to enjoy themselves.
Yes.
Where the rest, well, I'm thinking that I won't be in that group for a while, but you never know.
Never know.
Very good point. And another really great, obviously stream it, and that's what it's all about. Keeping the show on the road, as my father always said. So Gentry, what movie?
So many, but probably F9, and then probably Top Gun, and then probably No Time to Die. So
yes. And Nick?
Well, I'm not the multiplex action movie kind of guy, but I've started to like superhero movies after the Joker came. So I think Cruella will be something that I will enjoy in my local independent cinema.
Excellent. Very, very exciting. Look, I'm with Melissa on the Top Gun and then No Time to Die, because it's just, that's been moved so many times that we're really excited to see this. Okay, I feel like I could talk for a lot more, but I'm Irish. That's how we roll. So I'm gonna leave it there. But I can't thank our panelists enough. Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you so much, Rich. Thank you so much, Gentry, for your time and your thoughts. And I hope our audience has enjoyed it as much as me. Before I hand over to Nick to say goodbye as well, we just want to say we're going to focus on the next webinar. It'll be the last week of April. We'll promote it around like some of the new technologies coming out in the space, and really try to get into that a bit more in a bit more depth, and really the tools and the data tools, to Rich's point, that aren't as scary and are much easier. The revolution begins. Aren't really, they're not scary really, they just look scary. Nick, would you like to tie us up?
Yes, definitely. So I wanted to thank everybody that's been providing all these good questions. We only have a limited number of seats up here, but it's definitely not a question of not wanting to hear you guys' opinions. So I hope that everybody will continue answering the polls and doing the Q&A, so we can have as vivid a discussion as possible now that everything is changing so rapidly. But I think let that be the finishing words. There's another webinar coming up soon that you'll be notified about, and we look forward to seeing you guys again for another great discussion.
One last, viva la revolución! Viva!
Yeah.
Rich.
All right.
I didn't mean to do that today. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
I love it.
Bye.
Bye.